Welcome to part 4 of the great Chicago West Side Jewish areas of 1930 to 1955. This segment deals with 5 synagogues that were located between 14th and 16th Street. East of Hamlin, 14th became Douglas Boulevard. Our journey takes us from the right to the left, or from the east to the west. Our first stop on the east is on the 1500 South block of Christiana. We then move a block west to Holman Avenue for 2 stops, one on the 1500 and the other on the 1400 South block. Our final 2 stops take us a half a mile west to the 1400 South block on Hamlin, and then another half block west on 14th Street itself. Let us begin. We are now on the 1500 South block of Christiana, facing the east side of the street. We are looking at what was once Congregation Anshe Pavlich. This is the synagogue that my mother and her parents and brother went to throughout the 1930s and 40s. As the camera pans in for a close-up, you can see that the Yiddish writing of the congregation's name still exists above the portal of the doorway. What is difficult to recognize below the title name is another line that reads Nusach Sfard. However, outside the confines of the synagogue services, my mother's family did not adopt Sephardish customs. My mother's family lived on Ridgeway, which was 5 full blocks or 10 half blocks west of Christiana. This could make for rough going in inclement weather. But my grandfather hailed from Pavlich and felt more comfortable with those who hailed from the same village. The synagogue was also known as the Turner Avenue Shul, simply because before it was renamed Christiana, it was originally Turner Avenue. When the Queen of the Netherlands visited Chicago, she was honored with the renaming of the street to Christiana. Some of the congregants felt uncomfortable having a synagogue on such a street, so a group got up and left and rented space in the first Romanian congregation building on the north side of the street of Douglas Boulevard. So for a time there were 2 congregation Anshe Pavliches going on at the same time. Eventually, though, they reunited back into the Christiana Avenue building. In 1897, 3,400 Jews lived in the town of Pavlich, about 100 kilometers southwest of Kiev, and that represented 42% of the population. By 1937, somehow the Jews increased to 88% of the population, but by 1941 they were wiped out by the Nazis. My mother's parents are buried in the Pavlich section at Waldheim Cemetery. It seems that by 1975, the Pavlich Society in Chicago had become inactive. One can do an internet search on Lisa Cooper and Pavlich and see the pictures that she has taken on her trip back to Pavlich in 2005. And now on to our next synagogue. One way to do this would be to turn around and cut through the backyard or alley to Holman Avenue. But since this is not practical in our virtual tour, we'll take the long route, which is to turn back north on Christiana to 15th Street, hang a left, and go the half block down to Holman Avenue. We make a left here to go further south on Holman to the middle of the 1500 block. This was the temporary location of Congregation Anshe Shalom, until they built their more permanent structure at the corner of Independence and Polk. Their previous site had been at the corner of Ashland and Polk, and that site also now exists as a church. In fact, it is possibly the oldest remaining original synagogue building in Chicago. The synagogue now is on Melrose in the Lakeview area of Chicago. Our next synagogue takes us to the left, or to go north to the end of the block and at the corner of 15th and Homan. So let's do it. We're going to make a left and we are heading back to the corner where you will immediately see the imposing red brick building. This was Congregation Ohel Yaakov Kovna, which probably meant that it was started by people who came over from Kovna. The Ten Commandments are still etched in stone at the top, and a Jewish star hovers on the lintel above the doorways. Interestingly, they borrowed the name from the famous synagogue in Kovna, Lithuania, Congregation Ohel Yaakov. Its previous location was at Peoria and 14th Place. The congregation moved to this building in 1923, and the spiritual leader was Rabbi Isaac Kaplan, spelled with a C rather than with a K. In 1889, at a prior site, the congregation had 1,200 people present, Kalman Kleinovitz chanting. And now on to the fourth synagogue in our list. It is more than a half a mile to the west, so to save time, we're going to fly through the air and magically be there. This has the outward look of a well-kept gated mansion. The only information I have on this place was that it was originally She'eris HaPleitah, which was the home and shtibel for Rabbi Meisels. Rabbi Meisels was a well-respected Hasidic rabbi and was also known as the Weitzner Rav, from where he hailed in Europe. When the neighborhood changed, he moved to Albany Park, and his son-in-law currently heads his religious operation in West Rogers Park. We now turn our attention to the fifth and last synagogue on this tour. So we head back north towards 14th Street or Douglas Boulevard. You'll notice that we're coming up on the right to this massive old synagogue building, which was Congregation Kehilath Jacob. We highlighted it in part 1. A block east from here would be the Theodore Herzl School. But rather than turning right and merging into Douglas Boulevard, we are sliding along on the side street here on Hamlin, and if we would continue it on, it would merge into Independence Boulevard. But instead, we hang a left and go west on 14th Street. Another block and we'll be on the 3900 West corner. And so here we are at Beth Israel Anshe Yanova. It stayed in this location until 1955 when it moved to East Rogers Park and was housed in a previous movie theater. It stayed there until 1977. The opaque block is meant to show the last vestige of Jewish symbol on the building. In 1964, Rabbi Melvin Rush assumed spiritual leadership of the congregation in its East Rogers Park location. It was not Orthodox, but rather a traditional synagogue. Another person doing research on closed synagogues in Chicago erroneously reports that this synagogue eventually moved to Skokie, but the Temple Beth Israel listed at the address that he provides is of the Reformed denomination and had previously been in Albany Park. In addition, this Beth Israel has no connection that I am aware of the congregation Beth Israel, another traditional synagogue that opened around 1955 on Devon in Peterson Park and which merged with another synagogue to become AG Beth Israel. And so ends this tour of these 5 synagogues located between 14th and 16th Street in the greater Lawndale area of Chicago's West Side. Stay tuned for Part 5, in which we cover the synagogues that lie north of Douglas Boulevard to Roosevelt Road.